Fitzpatrick takes the snap, drops back, lobs it back right corner. Decker! He's got it! Touchdown! Eric Decker scores! And the Jets have won it in overtime!
This is the Jet Take with Ben Blessington and Kyle Fahey.
Welcome back to another episode of the Jet Take, and it's a depressing one. The Jets, of course, just another future performance for them on offense and defense. We're going to break all that down. My prediction was wrong. I thought we were going to come back and Fitzpatrick was going to play well, and maybe it's time for Geno Smith. We'll discuss all of that in depth. As always, you can follow us at the Jet Take on Twitter. We're on iTunes, SoundCloud, iHeartRadio, pretty much anything you can think of. We're on all of those. But our main one is Twitter, so if you want to stay connected with our show and stuff, and we post throughout the week just Jet stuff and stuff about our show. So we do have a very special caller on the line, and we're going to get to him in just a second. But first, I'm going to bring on my co-host, who is mid-hurricane right now from Florida. Kyle Fahey, you're Mr. Money.
Here comes the money.
Here we go. Money talk.
Here comes the money. Money, money, money.
Dollar, dollar. Dollar, dollar.
Kyle, are you surviving the hurricane?
I've survived this season so far, so I think I'll survive this hurricane.
Yeah, I can hear the rain in the background, so just stay safe out there. Kyle, really quickly before we bring on our special caller, Adrian Murrell, just give us a brief breakdown of what you saw last Sunday.
Absolutely terrible football on the part of the New York Jets as a whole team, and you can't blame this on Ryan Fitzpatrick, guys. I know he threw 3 interceptions, but Brandon Marshall's come out and said that a couple of those were the wide receiver's fault. I don't know how much I believe that, but the defense couldn't stop a nosebleed. Jimmy Graham looks like the old Jimmy Graham. Brian Winters is an idiot. And that's about it. Just was not a good game for the Jets overall, and we definitely need to improve.
Well, I'm going to touch on a lot of the things you just said, but very briefly, Kyle, I think you're wrong on this. This is Ryan Fitzpatrick's fault, and although the first half was, he did play fine. If you go back and watch that game, he missed at least 4 or 5 touchdowns, and that's not an exaggeration.
Absolutely.
So that's the problem with the team, is when he plays safe the first 3 quarters, and maybe it's just because he's scarred after that Chiefs game.
Yes.
And when he plays safe, he's just not a very good quarterback. I mean, he's missing guys that are wide open. He's throwing behind them, and then when he does, in the fourth quarter when he has to let it fly, he doesn't play very well. So we'll talk about all that.
Wait. Ben, let's not act like he doesn't miss wide open receivers and throw it behind them.
That's not
every
what it
game.
Kyle, I'm agreeing with you. I'm saying he is. There is a picture. It happened the first quarter. Nobody noticed it when it happened. It was a completion to Nunwa for 7 or so yards. Brandon Marshall was wide open, and when I say wide open, there was not a guy within 10, 15 yards of him, just streaking down the middle of the field.
Jets.
Yeah, it sounds
like the Jets.
And he missed Robbie Anderson deep twice.
Yep.
Brandon Marshall had a 50-yard play. So even though they're solid plays and they're not gonna show up in the stat sheet, he still is not playing great through the first 3 quarters. And I understand he's the leader, but we'll talk about that. It feels like every other week on the show we have a damn quarterback controversy. So yeah, now it is time to bring on the person who's gonna brighten our moods, hopefully, Adrian Murrell. Was a running back for the Jets for a few years in the 90s. Many kids who grew up in the 90s that were Jets fans, this guy was their favorite player. And so we're really excited to bring him on. So, Adrian, how are you doing, man?
What's going on, guys? How's everyone?
We're good. We're excited to talk to you. I was wishing it was going to be a win coming off Seattle so we could talk about, how well the Jets played. But unfortunately, we're going to be talking about a pretty putrid performance. Yeah, so the way, I like to do these interviews whenever we bring on, players is we'll talk about, their time with the Jets. We'll talk about what the Jets currently, and then we'll talk if they have a foundation or something. We'll talk about that, and we know you have a very special one, so we'll get to that. So does that sound good, man, all 3 of those things?
Let's do it, man.
All right, well, let's start with the Jets right now, just because I think it's the fresh topic in our minds. I'm going to just open it up, guns blazing. Do you think it's time for Geno Smith? And I know you went to West Virginia, so you might have that Mountaineer connection. But do you think it's time to make a change?
Well, you don't want to. Yeah, I'm partial to Geno. Obviously, I want to see Geno get his shot. I felt like Geno could have had an opportunity last year, but then obviously Fitzpatrick, he got on a roll. But here's the deal, guys. If you take a stretch back from 5 games, Fitzpatrick has thrown many interceptions, and then, throwing 6 a couple weeks earlier and then throwing 3 this week, his confidence has got to be down, right? So I think that they need to give it, obviously they're giving him this week to kind of figure out what's going on, but they're looking at the tape just the way that you and I, we're looking at the tape, and they've got to be scratching their head and figuring out what's happening. And are we going to ride this horse to the end of the year and potentially have a bad year? I don't know if Todd wants to do that. I don't know if front office wants to do that, but clearly there's something going on with Fitzpatrick, and the chemistry's not there, and you just can't blame it all on Fitzpatrick. But hey, he is the leader, and he's got to be the guy that somehow get that ship righted on the offensive side. But it's just not offense still.
Yeah, I mean, from what I'm seeing is the defense is not as good as we thought they were. At least they're not playing like it. And we knew there was going to be a learning curve because there's a lot of young linebackers on that team. But the defensive line, minus that first game, is not getting after the quarterback. The secondary is giving up a big play left and right. So the defense, while it's average and it would be considered good on a number of teams, for the Jets, what they need, especially when you don't have a franchise quarterback, they're not playing well enough. And then on the offensive side of the ball, I mean, perhaps the weakest point of this team, what we thought was the weakest point of the team going into the season, is maybe becoming one of the strongest, and that's the offensive line. Fitzpatrick has had all day to throw. The receivers are struggling to get open at times, but they are getting open, and Fitzpatrick is not hitting them. So I share the same sentiment that I think they should give him another game or so. But the problem with him is Fitz is generally pretty good in the first half. He's at least not horrible. It happens in the fourth quarter.
Right.
We'll see. We'll see this Steelers game. And generally, when his back is against the wall, he and people are doubting him, that's when he plays at his best.
I think they can help him out though. I think they can help him out, guys, by having a little bit more balance offensively. Forte is a really superb back. I know that he's got a couple injuries that he's battling this week, but I'm sure he'll be ready to go because I believe he practiced today. But they've got to give some sort of balance offensively, and give Fitzpatrick an opportunity to not be so predictable. And then if he can find a way to get the balls down, hit his open targets, heck, this team is a very good team. It's just those little things. Now the confidence has been knocked down a bit. It's hard because we've been in these situations. I was on a 1-15 there. Wasn't that we weren't good. It was just we always found a way to lose, and that's what I'm kind of seeing now. We're finding another way to lose these games.
Yeah, and Adrian and Kyle here. First of all, thank you for being on the show. And second of all, you're a natural at this because you just bridged me right into my first question. Bilal Powell is one of the most explosive guys on this team, and I personally think we're not using him right. Do you agree with me? And if so, how can we use him better?
I think you can use him in some screen, when they're in down and distance, situations. He's been always a great screen runner. He's been a great, person who, disguised the draw, play action. And then also he gets the tough, dirty yards in the, in between the tackles. So you got to give him the opportunity. You got to give those guys up front the opportunity to lean on those guys on the other side. This is one of the strong suits of the Jets. So let's get them some continuity up front. Let them have some confidence, and that's just it's really no secret sauce. Yeah, you just everyone's got to try to pull together and play as a unit. That's where it's at.
Yeah, and his counterpart, Matt Forte, basically what we've seen from him is either he's getting 30 carries or he's getting nothing. How do you think the Jets can improve upon that?
Well, I think that Coach Chan, I can't talk right now, guys. Gailey, thank you. I appreciate it. Thanks for helping me out, fumbling around here. But he's a balanced type coordinator. So they're looking at what Forte's got these last 2 games. I believe like 92 yards in 2 games. They got to find a way to get him more involved in the game early. Get those guys, like I said just a minute ago, get those guys up front going in the right direction, leaning forward, instead of just sitting back there and pass pro all day. Because at the end of the game, that's when you see those other guys on the other end pinning their ears back and our guys are a little tired. And then that's when, bad things have happened offensively up front.
Yeah, absolutely. And speaking of up front, the offensive line play for the Jets has been one of the best in the league, according to Pro Football Focus. How big is the offensive line in running the football? As a running back yourself, now I know that may sound like a stupid question, but a lot of people really underestimate the offensive linemen in this game of football. You just, stress the importance of guys like Nick Mangold and James Carpenter doing what they do on a weekly basis to help running backs?
Oh yeah, you can't survive without those guys. They really are the success of most runners, of all runners. I mean, I only know of one runner who blocked or ran with very little blocking. That's Barry Sanders, to be honest with you. But I just think that they've got to give those guys a chance to find their rhythm up front. What are the plays that they like to run? Kind of what does Forte? I mean, it's all a balance, right? And what some of the runs that Forte was having early on, that was having success, maybe they need to go back to look and see how they were gaining those yards. How was it a tangle? Was they trapping? What was it? I haven't looked at the game in depth to kind of figure out what type of plays they're running offensively. But the teams that are successful, they pay the offensive line. It pays dividends if they invest in those guys and get those guys continuity, and they get years of playing with one another.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's a big part of the game. And going on here to a new subject, you were drafted in 1993, and then you really burst onto the scene in 1995. Who was the player that you expect to really break out this year, going into their second or third year?
Well, I like this. I'm going to give some love to my West Virginia alum. I think if Geno gets an opportunity to come in this game or this season, I think he's going to surprise a lot of folks, and I think he may be the key of the success of the Jets this year if they keep going this way. But in terms of what Matt Forte is doing, giving him the opportunity, and I'm a little biased there as well. I think that this guy is going to be an unsung hero for the Jets if they give him an opportunity. If they lean on him, sometimes what you start to hear is that he's 30 years old. I'm starting to see that in some of the clippings, But when I look at him run, he still has the patience. He still has the burst to go through. He's still got the great hands, And sometimes guys get nicked up, and when that happens, he finds a way to get back on the field, which he's doing now with those ribs and also with his knee, and give those guys a chance.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you look at some of the young players the Jets have on this team, Quincy Numwa, Leonard Williams, and even Geno Smith. Guys who have a lot of talent.
Yeah.
So,
Absolutely.
Yeah. Who is the guy right now that you think is, like you said, the unsung hero of this team? And I know you said Matt Forte, but besides him, who is it really for the Jets? The guy that doesn't really get enough credit.
Well, right now, look at this. If you look at their record, I don't know who the unsungs are right now. I think there's a lot of uncertainty. It's not a lot of continuities. It's not there's someone that you can just lean on that's getting it done. I think it's on a whole that guys are just they're good, but they're not excelling at what they do. So I really don't have an unsung yet. I think it's early to give that title. So let's kind of see what this next month brings for our team and see where it goes.
And now, Adrian, I know you probably have experience with this, but the fans in New York are very impatient, and Todd Bowles is a guy who's come under a lot of fire recently, along with Fitzpatrick. But Todd Bowles specifically, it's his second year. He's a few games into it, and he's not really showing the maturity he needs to have in his second year, whether it comes to clock management or in-game, substitutions or whatever. Do you see the same thing? Do you agree that Todd Bowles has yet to really grow as a head coach, or do you think he's still learning and that that Jets fans should just stay pat, be patient, and wait for him to keep developing?
Yeah, absolutely. I definitely believe that they should stay patient with Todd. I think Todd has been. He's proven. He's done great things on defensively. He knows. His defense last year with the Jets. It was a great, great defense. So offensively, they got to pull their all units together. And I just think that the fans need to give Todd some more time. It's early, and let him, put his team together, see what happens.
Yeah, I agree. I think a lot of fans are hard on Todd Bowles. Now I'm going to ask the same question, but this time about Chan Gailey, because you can make whatever.
What about Chan?
I mean, he is. He's either praised as being this amazing offensive coordinator, or just criticized for why are you running a QB sneak on 3rd and 10 or whatever. So
Right.
Same question, but this time for Chan Gailey. Do you think that the Jets should scale back his role calling the offensive plays and maybe give it to a guy like Kevin Patullo, the quarterbacks coach, or whoever?
No, because that's going to be disruptive to the team itself. If Todd wasn't the guy, or if the head coach didn't take over those duties, which Todd isn't because he's not an offensive mind, I think you've got to let it ride out. This year, I think sometimes you just got to let these guys play through it. I'm hoping Chan can kind of figure out what units and what groupings are going to work best for the team. He's been around this game a long time, Chan. And he's a good coach. I like Chan a lot. So I'm pulling for him. I know there's grumblings about, hey, what are we going to do with Chan? What are we going to do with Todd? I mean, it's only 4 games in the year. So obviously we would like for that first quarter to be a little bit better than what it was. But, stick and hang. I wish we'd hang in there and kind of see what Chan and also Todd, what they can come up with, this next quarter.
Yeah, I completely agree. And now as we kind of, segue into your career, but we'll keep it with one last kind of question, talking about, these Jets. One thing that I'm worried about this team is that they won't be able to stop the bleeding, which is huge for an NFL team. I knew, and I guess all Jets fans should know that the Jets were going to lose at least a game in the first 6 games because they were playing 5 playoff teams in the Buffalo Bills who, swept us twice. So I knew going into the year that those first 6 games were going to drop some. And the thing I was worried about, and I'm worried about to this day, is are the Jets going to be able to stop the bleeding and rebound, and get back on their feet and start winning games? How important is that? And I know it's obviously super important, but the Jets have now dropped 2 in a row, and they go into Hines. They haven't won there in the regular season in forever.
Right.
I guess 2010 was the last time, and then they got to go travel to the West Coast on the road against Arizona. So these are 2 huge games, basically with their season on the line. So how important is it? Just elaborate on how important it is to stop the bleeding. Well,
it's important to stop the bleeding. I mean, and I do feel that these are 2 challenging road weeks coming up. Obviously, they can't look past the Steelers to look at Arizona, but they have enough talent to play with these teams. I think, this if any week, this should be the week that they, heck, I think Forte or the backs should get 40 carries. They need to take the air out of the ball. Let's keep the Steelers high power offense on the sideline. So, if they split, if they get one out of these next 2, that's great. But I'm thinking that they may drop one. But it's still early. And they're 1-3. If we get, like I say, if we get out of this thing 2-5, I think we'll be a success because these first weeks, as you stated, are pretty brutal. And those guys in that locker room, they got to stay together. That's really the key. They can't start letting guys like ourselves, because I'm one of you guys, outside the locker room. They start believing in that, can they or can't they overcome this slow start. You've seen teams in the past make have a slow start and then turn that ship around. I'm optimistic and feeling that the Jets can do it themselves this year.
Now we're going to go into your career during the 90s. And obviously you really, as Kyle said, you burst onto the scene in 1995. Who was probably the biggest mentor or somebody who really helped you grow as a running back in the NFL?
Well, I was with guys like Johnny Johnson, Brad Baxter. I mean, those guys were my first mentors in terms of game preparation or just, preparing myself for the week. We had guys like Richie Anderson. It was a great competition. Guys that did very good in college and had an opportunity to get to the pros. And we were all young, so I think that we looked at, the challenge, that how can I get myself on the field. And there was just, great backs in that era that I was trying to be, when I get an opportunity, have an opportunity to get out there and play with those guys.
Yeah, I mean, those guys are always really, key to your growth and stuff. So sorry to cut you off there a little bit.
No, that's okay.
Now let's talk about. Oh, sorry. Do you have something that you'd like to say?
Yeah, but I guess if you ask for my mentors, I really, Ronnie Lott, there wasn't running backs that I felt like was my mentors. It was guys like Ronnie Lott. There was guys like Rob Moore that taught me how to be a professional. I think that really was the beginning of my career, having guys like that teach me how to take care of my body, how to be a professional, do film study at night, and things of that nature.
Yeah, it's funny that you bring up Ronnie Lott because we had Victor Green, former player of the Jets, on last week, and he said that Victor Green was one of his biggest mentors too. That leads me to the question. Ronnie Lott obviously was one of the best safeties of all time. What was he like in that locker room? You've already said that he was your mentor, but is he one of those rah-rah guys, or was he just one of the guys who led by example?
Yeah, no, he wasn't no rah-rah at all. Ronnie Lott was a guy that when you looked into his eyes, you knew what that young man's intent was, And, Ronnie was getting a little older in his career my rookie year. And after practice, Ronnie, he was starting to be susceptible to, running back to double moves or cuts and so forth. We would stay after practice and work on, I would have to stay after practice 45 minutes. I'm dead tired running the scout team. And this guy was still, wanting to get more reps after practice for that long. So it was, he had an impact on a lot of people's careers. Everybody I know that talk when the name Ronnie Lott is mentioned, they've got some pretty interesting stories about, Ronnie and the finger or whatever else, But it was a pleasure, being able to play with him my rookie year. It was really good for me.
Yeah, and speaking of the locker room, there were a lot of guys in the locker room. Who do you think was, in your career, the guy who was the biggest mouth in the locker room, just loved to talk trash?
Oh, man. I mean, there's, you could probably pick any guy on the defensive side of the ball, man. Those guys are built, to have a lot of confidence, and they want to exude that confidence. But in terms of trash talking, there's 1,000 of those guys. I don't know, one from another,
Yeah, and Adrian, that was an interesting question.
I kind of block that stuff out when those guys start talking trash. Essentially what they're trying to do is get you out of your game, and I kind of try to stay away from that and try to stay focused on what I need to do to be successful.
Yeah, and Adrian, now your final year with the Jets, you played under Bill Parcells, who was a huge mentor for Todd Bowles. How would you characterize Bill Parcells as a head coach? And we know he's this stern head coach who's going to install a lot of discipline into the Jets organization. But how would you describe him as a coach? And what do you think he's passed on to Todd Bowles, the current coach of the New York Jets?
Well, I'm not 100% sure what he's passed on to Todd. I mean, I don't know. I know Todd played with the Redskins, but I'm not sure if they crossed paths where Todd played for him or worked for him. I don't know the history there. But in terms of what I know about Bill only gave me nothing but respect. Gave me an opportunity to play for him again when he brought me back to the Cowboys in 2003. It's unfortunate for me, but it was great for Curtis and some of those guys. Obviously, he's a Hall of Famer. But he told me in '97 when we was after that last game when we lost to Detroit Lions, he called me and said that he's going to get me some linemen next year. And he got the linemen, but unfortunately, I demanded the trade because he brought in Curtis.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned that's a great segue into my next question. How difficult was it to leave the Jets after being with that organization for plenty of years?
I mean, as for any young runner or any player at that age in their career, and they've vested in the city, they vested in the team, they don't generally want to see themselves leave that place where they won. Where they were drafted at, where they felt like they was a part of the growth of the team. So at that point, I was disappointed, but I did also understand that it was a business. And at the end of the day, I knew I can continue to play football. So I just say, look, let's see what we can do, and so I can continue to have an opportunity to be figure out where my career went. So it worked out. Although I wish I'd have stayed in the East, I believe there was some blockage there that I couldn't go exactly where I wanted to go, but it ended up okay with the Cardinals. I enjoyed the stay.
Yeah, business with teams is always hard, and we've seen it with Muhammad Wilkerson, Ryan Fitzpatrick, and a couple other guys on the Jets. How much of the business aspect is really in the game? I mean, we obviously see you guys play, but how much does that really affect you as a player? Does it affect you on the field and off the field? How much?
Well, I think that guys are now getting a little more savvy about the business aspect of football. They know that it's not. Most guys aren't going to be in one place for very long, maybe 3 to 4 years at most, or 5 years. You see very few guys stay 10 years in one place, and if it is, it's very fortunate. But the game has changed. Guys are marketing themselves more. There's different outlets of how they can market themselves. Sometimes it's good for them, sometimes it's bad. But the game I think is better because of the ability to go into free agency. The contracts now in terms of TV rights and stuff like that is all the salaries are you see what the salaries are now, and I think it's a good thing, and I think they're doing a good job and market themselves. But hey, at the end of the day, like I said a minute ago, this is a business, and I think these guys now understand that more times than not.
Yeah, Adrian, sorry, Kyle, to cut you off. And Adrian, before we move ahead to talk about what you do off the field, any great stories you can think of? And I know it's hard to think off the top of your head, and we've asked some pretty open-ended questions. But any great stories or memories that you have from playing with the Jets? Like, what's your favorite memory with your time with the Jets? Because we know you went through some rough seasons there. Not necessarily you.
5 years, 4 different head coaches. I don't know how many different coordinators. Come on, yeah. But I mean, it's really. I mean, there's so many great stories to kind of pick one out would be. I wouldn't even know how to do that. But really, kind of just being a young 22-year-old kid, being drafted. Playing in one of the biggest city in America, going through that with with Victor Green and Aaron Glenn and Ray Mickens, all those those are my guys, and we still keep in contact to this day. It's just I don't know somebody's car or I tell you what, the most memorable moment I had as a Jet is when I brought my '68 Camaro up there. I built this drag car. There was myself, Brad Baxter, and Richie Anderson, Stevie Anderson. We were big into muscle cars, and as you guys know, out in the island back in that day, there was a lot of street racing. And over there at Hosta, there would come like 2 and 3 in the morning, and they would make all this commotion, and you see these guys racing their cars right there by the university, and then Brad built this Mustang, and then I ended up building this the '68 Camaro I was talking about. And when they cut the car on in the parking lot, everybody ran out. That was really one of my highlights in terms of, it had nothing to do with football, but just in terms of fellowship with the guys. They still talk about that to this day. So it's pretty cool.
Yeah, I mean, that sounds like a pretty cool story. I mean, cars are amazing if you can hand build them. I mean, just the satisfaction you get out of working on something. But speaking of working on something, you have the Adrian Murrell Foundation. Why don't you go ahead and tell us a little bit about that?
Well, the Adrian Murrell Foundation, basically, we started in '96, and my son has got what they call the sickle cell trait. It's not the disease, but one of the things that within our community, there's not enough of awareness about getting tested. So we started the foundation for that. And I'm going to be rolling some other things out, which is called Prep Star Challenge within the next couple of weeks. So I would love to come back on and kind of talk to you guys about it and how folks can get involved with, with this organization or with our foundation to help us out with our cause. But it's really basically giving the kids a foundation from 6 to 14, giving them, the understanding how to be a student athlete. And I think we got some really cool things that we're going to roll out. So I want you guys to, be on the lookout. We would definitely give you guys some heads up, and we'll be sending some stuff. So we look forward to sharing with you what prep, SEAL Prep or Prep Star Challenge is all about.
Yeah, and Adrian, we also know that you're going with a lot of football players, and last week we had Eric Coleman on, and a couple weeks ago we had Victor Green. But Eric Coleman told us a little bit about what you guys are doing in Italy. So can you let our listeners know just a little bit more about that? I believe you guys are going to Tuscany, and you guys are going to have a week of golf or whatever, and 70% of that goes to inner city kids, I believe. I'm not necessarily sure. So just break it down for some of our listeners.
Well, sorry guys, I can't break it down no more than what you just said. I just know that this is something that is come about. Eric is putting this thing together, and I grew up in Italy. I grew up in a town called Vicenza. My dad was military, so it gives me a chance to go back, take my family. So I hope that this golf tournament actually happens. I'm ready for it.
Yeah, I mean, that sounds like an amazing trip, and it definitely does an amazing thing. I mean, you look at a lot of what the NFL players are doing today with charities. It's a big thing. Now, you said you said your dad was a military guy and you grew up in Italy. Tell us a little bit about that, because I was not aware of that about you.
Oh, you never heard about that? Yeah, let me fill you in. Yeah, when I was 6, we moved to Vicenza, Italy. My dad was my first football coach over there. And I just fell in love with the game. One of my biggest heroes was Tony Dorsett, and that's why I became a running back. And from there, from 6 to 10, we was in Vicenza, Italy. We came back to Fort Bragg, North Carolina, and then when I was 14, we moved to Hawaii. So my dad, he had some really cool tours, and we kind of seen the world through armed service.
Yeah, I mean, you said you fell in love with Italy over there. What was football like over there? Because I know Italy doesn't have the best American football talent. I don't know how to put that, but
yeah. But think of this: it was on base, so it was Americanized football. It was all American kids that were pretty much playing it. It was great football over there for to be starting in like kind of a Pop Warner. I can't even recall what's the name of the organization, but we had a blast. Great introduction in the football, and they also had an Army team, so they would play like Aviano, the Navy or the Air Force team, and so we did get a chance to see some pretty decent football over there outside of Pop Warner.
Now, Adrian, you mentioned how your dad was serving, and then that's why you were in Italy. Do you think that's where you got some of your toughness? Because you were a very gritty runner. I've just watched some of your plays, and it looks like it's hard to bring you down. So do you think that's where you got some of your toughness, is from your dad's side?
Well, my dad definitely was somebody that that I admire, and by being in a military background, it's a little the discipline was kind of there. No nonsense, but I just think it's just really God-given talent that afforded me a chance to run the ball, and then going up against better competition, or the longer you play, the better you hone your skills. And I just this was something that I was called to do. I've enjoyed playing the game of football.
And Adrian, that's a sorry, Kyle, to cut you off. And Kyle, by the way, Kyle's having some mic issues because he's in the middle of a hurricane.
It's all the hurricane stuff down there.
Yeah, he's surviving.
Well, be safe. Be safe.
And now, Adrian, and that's a great story about your dad. Now, if we're going to talk a little bit more stuff about your career, I know it's very unorganized, and we're jumping all over the place.
we're just going with it, huh? It's all good. Let's go.
Well, so if you could change one thing about your career, whether it was requesting a trade or on that 1-15 team with Kotite, what would be the one thing? If you could change anything, what would you change, or would you not change any of it?
Well, there's 2020 is. I mean, hindsight is always 2020. One of the things that I wish that I had the foresight to understand how quick the time that you will spend playing professional football is short. I can remember what my mindset was when I came back to play for Bill with the Cowboys versus when I was a young man thinking that this was going to last forever. You got a different focus. You got a different attitude. And if I could have honed in on that, who knows? And I guess a lot of guys probably had that same thought or along those lines. Once you're kind of on your way out, you figure it out. And I had the chance to come back in and really, see, what privilege it is to really play the game of football, because it's 1% of. I mean, the odds are just crazy, So that would be the one thing, to really appreciate the ride a little bit more and to take it all in would really be something that I would probably have focused a little bit more on.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to play in the NFL. I mean, like you said, not a lot of guys making this league. But Ben mentioned a little bit back that you were a little bit of a gritty letter. I always thought that you were a guy that, they just couldn't tackle you a lot of the time for some reason or another. Is there anybody that you modeled your game after, or is that somebody like you looked up to who was previously in the league or even currently in the league when you were a rookie?
Well, one of the guys that I looked up to, a couple guys. Obviously, Tony Dorsett was my idol growing up, but Eric Dickerson, I thought he was such a smooth runner, and I think everyone has their own style of run. One of the things I was able to see things maybe from the backside. My vision was really, and quickness was really, what I was as a runner. We're talking about offensive line, and we're talking about, chemistry. I just would have loved to have seen if that young Jet team went out in 93, 94, 95, because I do think there was a super, talented guys there. If we could have had, a little bit more success there, what that team would have looked like as an older, mature team.
And Adrian, you've been super insightful talking about the current Jets and the past Jets and even your charity. Maybe you should get into broadcasting, Adrian. You guys are killing me, man. You guys are helping me out, man. You're giving me all the pointers on how to talk, man. Seriously. Hey, you guys, whenever we have a former player on the show or a beat writer, it makes our show, the listeners spike and everything. So thanks to you so much. Last question for you, Adrian. Actually, I have two last questions. One, who's going to win this Sunday, the Jets or the Steelers, and why? And then two, what do you think the final record will be for the Jets?
Wow. All right.
It's a big question.
Yeah, these are huge. I believe the Jets are going to win if they run the ball with Forte. If we establish some sort of balance, and if you see Ben Roethlisberger and those guys on the sideline, we're going to win. But I'm optimistic that we're going to win, and I do think that we'll end up about 9-7.
Good stuff. Wait, is that good enough for a wild card spot or?
You know what? Yes, I'm going to see there's going to be some more parity in the AFC, but we're going to be looking for that wild card spot.
There we go. That's what we like to hear, Adrian.
Fingers across. All right.
Hey, thank you so much for coming on. We're going to make sure to tweet out your foundation and the trip to Tuscany and everything. So thank you so much for coming on, man.
Appreciate it, guys. Well, I look forward to getting back on with you guys in the future. Okay.
All right, hey, man, we will definitely invite you back on, probably after the season. See if your 9-7 prediction came through.
Yeah, you know what? I hope I'm wrong. I hope we're 11-5. I hope we don't lose maybe one more or two more. So let's see how it goes.
Yeah, let's just not lose for the rest of the season. Go 13-3. Win the
That'd
Super
be
Bowl.
great.
do that.
That'd be phenomenal.
That's even better.
Why not? Hey, Adrian, thank you so much for coming on, man.
Thanks for being on.
Y'all be good, man.
How you too.
All right.
Cut him off there a little bit, but at the end, well, that was Adrian Murrell, former
Now
running
I
back.
can take a deep breath and just actually talk Jets without being nervous about messing up.
Yeah,
Oh,
I know,
man.
Kyle, the rain was just awful. I was
I know,
muting
I
you,
know.
and then we were having miscommunications, muting.
We're good now, 'cause now
it was very
nobody-
unorganized, but
Nobody's gonna live up to Adrian Murrell right now, so I can just be myself and talk to the people we have. No offense to our callers, but you're not Adrian Murrell. A lot of you guys are really smart, but